Hello. Welcome to At Home with the Intuitive Cook, the podcast giving a voice to everyday home cooks like you and me. Join me around the kitchen table as we chat about finding cooking ease and inspiration beyond rules and recipes and the noise of celebrity chef culture. It's not rocket science, it's just dinner. Hello, and welcome. I'm your host, Katerina Pavlakis, the Intuitive Cook, and at home with me today is John Kanell. John used to be a maths teacher and a home cook just like you and me. That is, until he took his recipes to YouTube and created a sensation. His Preppy Kitchen channel now has millions of followers, and he has published 2 best-selling cookbooks. I'm really thrilled that John is joining me today to chat all about cooking at home with flair and practicality. So let's dive into some home-cooked deliciousness. Welcome, John. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are a maths teacher turned YouTube personality. You have millions of followers on your Preppy Kitchen channel, but you are really a home cook. Have I got that right?
I'm a mom-taught chef. My mother was one of those lovely intuitive cooks who never measures and just throws things together and loves to experiment with different ingredients and flavors. And I learned everything from her, really.
And I believe you have like a cultural mix in your heritage from your mom and from your dad. Is that true?
It's true. My mother is from Mexico and my father was Greek and French Canadian. So we had a lovely combination of cultures that came together at the dinner table. And my mother loves her Mexican cuisine, but she learned to make a lot of really delicious Greek and French dishes too. And really, she enjoyed exploring the world in her kitchen. She loved learning about new flavors, new dishes, and we always grew up with a really lovely library of cookbooks in the kitchen.
How has all that left its mark on your cooking?
For me, it's given me an appreciation for ingredients and experimentation, and also for practicality in a lot of ways, because my mother was very busy, but she always managed to put something delicious on the table. And, food is really love. It's like where we come together and commune, have time to share our day. It's so important, but it can seem like a bit of a slog to get through. So I know that feeling of panic that people have where you have 20 minutes at the end of the day, everyone's hungry and you're tired, but it's time to make something delicious for the family. And that's really what inspired my new cookbook, Preppy Kitchen Super Easy. I had a lot of experience myself as the dad of twins who are getting older and, life just gets busier. I still make delicious things. I want them to look nice as well and have, a bit of elevation about them. But I understand that time is a constraint. So I made a lot of streamlined recipes with simpler methods, less ingredients, things like air fryers and slow cookers and instant pots where possible, and really just gave people the option so they can have the confidence to do it themselves as well.
What makes a recipe super easy for you? What do you think are the hallmarks of a super easy recipe?
Well, it shouldn't take a lot of time, first of all. There are some recipes that I really love, like a German chocolate cake, for example. And that one has your fluffed egg whites that are folded in. It's a lot of gentle processes. And the end result is this incredibly delicate cake. But that's a labor of love. I do it for birthdays a lot of the time. It's one of my favorite cakes. But in the book, it's more stir-together recipes and things that will even stir together in one bowl. So you have your dry ingredients, you whisk them, you make a little well, the wet ingredients go in, and it all comes together. So super easy means less dishes, a really easy technique, less time, and hopefully a lack of exotic or rarefied ingredients, because that's another stressor. If you have to go to the market, oh my gosh, it's not good.
You also talk a lot in your book about variations and how to vary recipes and how to riff on recipes. So, tell me about how variations work with your recipes.
I think of recipes as guidelines. Some people think of recipes as a tome. It's like it has to be done step by step this way to reach the perfection of the end result in my eyes. And I understand that. But for me, as someone who is a bit more intuitive when I'm cooking at home, like I love to just like toss things together and like, it's just going to work. I know this combination of flavors, or I scale it up or scale it down depending on how hungry people are. I wanted the book to have recipes that give you a guideline, but then allowed for experimentation with some training wheels. Like eventually people can just do whatever they want, but try this spice combination or swap this protein out. Or if you don't feel like making this as a cake, it could be cupcakes or layer cake or sheet cake. The list goes on. So you can have different flavors, different mix-ins, different vegetables you're using in dishes as well. And you get a really lovely end result because at the end of the day, you make the recipe your own. And also, I feel like it decreases stress. Like if I'm making my Mediterranean pasta salad, for example, I allow you to use like any crunchy vegetable that you enjoy that's in the fridge. So clear your fridge out, get some of those ingredients. So, have some freedom, enjoy, save a trip to the market, and clear your fridge out at the same time.
I find a lot of the people I talk to, they're actually scared to experiment themselves. As you said, when you cook at home, you just throw some things together because you already have that confidence. So how do we find that confidence? Is it something we grow up with, or is it something we can learn later? How do we find that confidence to trust our own taste, as it were, to throw things together?
It's really a combination. So you have some people who are naturally talented and have a mind that's geared towards like flavors and techniques, and they're just amazing in the kitchen. That's one category of people. For the rest of us, we might not feel confident at first and be very scared, but then with practice, you gain confidence. And a lot of people ask, like, if I have zero experience and I really want to try, but I'm afraid, what should I do? And I usually tell them to find one recipe that they like, that's not super intense, and make that, and make it again and again until it's almost muscle memory. They're really happy with the result. They've gotten better at it, and they feel like there's some level of mastery. It's just like any kind of thing you learn as a math or science student. Have a technique down or a concept, learn it until you are the master of it, and then move on with that basis. Don't do a scattershot approach where you try different recipes all the time, and maybe you're not succeeding at them, and hopefully you're learning some lessons, but those lessons might be lost without practice. So one thing, and then build from that after you feel confident.
Yeah, that is really good advice. Do you remember how you learned cooking? Is it a specific memory, or was it just something that you kind of breathed in from the air around you?
In large part, it was breathing it in from what was around me. And my mom taught me a lot of things, but when I think about it, what she really taught me was to be curious. And I was so curious. I'm like, how recipes work? How are these done? It made me want to like look up other recipes and research things online and try them out. And like I remember being a teenager and like having all these little baking projects. I would make a chocolate cake, or I would process chestnuts, and I'd have this chestnut meat to make chestnut bonbons or a flourless chestnut torte, or I'd make a tiramisu. And these are all learning experiences. Or I tried to make a steak and it turned out gray and it was a failure. But I learned from those things. Or I remember as a child, I was trying to make a bread and I ran out of flour. And mind you, I was very little, so don't judge me. But I substituted baking soda for some of the flour I was missing, because in my mind, as a 7-year-old or whatever, like it was a white powder, it'll work. I learned it didn't work. But that was a very valuable, like important lesson that I will never forget. And you learn by failing. So be curious, be feared to fail, and just keep trying.
Yeah, there is something there to remember that failing is part of the process. I think a lot of people fail and then decide they are a terrible cook and then kind of don't really want to try again, which is a shame because failure is part of it, isn't it?
It's the same thing for having kids in the kitchen, because a lot of us want to have these moments with our kids and like be together as a family in the kitchen. And like, how do you get started on that? And the answer is training wheels. So start off maybe just whisking pre-measured ingredients, go into a bowl, and then the kids are measuring using a scale, whatever else. But understand that this will begin with some messiness and failure, and it's not going to be perfect to begin with. We're only going to learn by failing, and you have to give yourself the space and the grace to do that.
And how has your own cooking and your own way of being in the kitchen changed now that you have twins with you in the kitchen?
It was a big change. I have loved giving them more and more freedom as they get older. So at first it was a bit of a quandary, like, how do I do this? I had like big stools to stand on so they could reach the counter. And they were just whisking things together. By the time they were like 5.5, we were making pizzas and they were able to do it on their own from scratch. So I would measure out the warm water and get it temped correctly for the yeast to bloom in. But then they would use a scale, measure the flour out, combine ingredients. They would knead it, let it rise, and then all the way to the end. And as a former teacher, there's so many lessons that are very practical when you're in the kitchen. So you talk about measurement, accuracy, estimation, part-whole relationships with fractions. It all becomes real when you have something in front of you as opposed to like an abstract concept. So I love kind of sneakily combining the two as well.
Life is the best classroom, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
You spoke about how sharing food was a big thing growing up. How have you taken that into your own family?
Well, part of it is like being able to host. So hosting dinners is lovely. A lot of us feel so much anxiety about it because we put this expectation on ourselves. One, that we'll do everything ourselves, that will be perfect, and it's going to be the best time ever. And that could happen. Much easier for you to figure out what you'll be doing, maybe what you can invite your guests to help you with, or what you could bring in as store-bought, and then how you can prepare so that everything is ready ahead of time. So you're making what you can ahead, and when guests come, you're just popping things into the oven and doing some assembly. Because nobody wants to be stressed out and tired and harried when you're having guests over. You know, that's not the experience that's going to be conducive to like sharing and breaking bread.
We also share food when we're just having dinner at home with our immediate family, which is like an everyday thing. Even that, I think, there is so much in this sort of modern food culture that seems to be making cooking the obstacle of eating. And it's something that we try to avoid and try to minimize.
Yeah, I think I understand why it can be very daunting and how that's become part of the culture to like make it easier to the point where like, what are you doing? One thing I suggest to people is to start earlier and eke out the minutes that you can. Like sometimes in the morning, it might sound silly, but I know what I'm going to make for dinner. And I know I'm going to be very busy in the afternoon, but I will have like toss some meat in a marinade, or I'll do some preparatory chopping and just pop the veggies into the fridge so they're ready. And I'll do that like if I have any spare minutes. So when dinner comes around, it's much more manageable. And like, even if you can't do that, like a lot of times you could buy like a mirepoix mixture at the store and just get a little bit of a head start so that you're still feeling like you can make something that you enjoy. I would say that part of the joy of making food for yourself is that you like the way it tastes. Because when I buy things, you know, if I got delivery, you know, for me, a lot of times it's maybe a bit too heavy or a bit too salty, or like the sauce is just like a little bit too thick for me. It's like there's not enough lemon or lime or whatever. And you control that when you make the food, and you're so much more happy to eat it, not just because you made it, but like you will genuinely enjoy the taste. So to get that done, you just have to find time wherever you have these little moments and make use of it if possible.
So it's now the morning where you are. So do you have a plan for dinner already? What are you cooking today?
I do. Today I'll be making an apricot chicken stew. It's actually one of the recipes in the book. So I had a little bit of time this morning and I did my veggie chopping while the kids were eating breakfast and I put it in a little bowl. It's in the fridge waiting. And, later on after lunchtime, I might have the chicken breast like prepared and cut and that'll be waiting as well. And then I can just kind of get it done really quickly. Also having the right groceries. So knowing what you're going to make and just having the ingredients you need. Like, do you know the main dish? What is the side? If you have like your main course and you have a starch, I love just having a quickly blanched vegetable. So it's like crisp, tender, very well salted water. And it could be so simple and still really lovely. The first chapter in the book is about organizing your pantry. And one of the other ones is I call them meal makers. Because a lot of times you have a set list of vegetables that people like in the house. It can get kind of boring. What can you do to spice it up? That can be a dressing. It can be a sauce. These are things that you could have on hand in your refrigerator. Like I love making a batch of dressing on the weekend and I'll just use it as needed through the week. And the same for like a hummus or some tzatziki. You can just have it and it makes your meal so much more palatable and delicious.
And variable, I suppose, because these are, the sauces and the dressings and the dips are those things that can turn leftovers into a completely different meal.
Totally. And like if I was having leftovers, it could be a bit disappointing for the family sometimes, especially children. They like variety is the spice of life for them. So you could always have like a quick something. It could be popovers. Like popovers are so enjoyable to eat and so quick to make. That batter could be resting in your fridge. Like you could whip it together in the morning, have it in the fridge, and it bakes off in a few minutes. So easy. Or some dropped biscuits. These are really delicious things that you can throw together quickly, prepare ahead of time, and they make the meal much more special, even if it was just some ho-hum leftovers you're not excited about.
Yeah, you say in your book that you like simple recipes that feel special.
Yeah, I love a project bake as well. Like if it's a weekend or a nice afternoon, I would love to spend time in the kitchen making a creme anglaise and like a spiced pastry. Some beautiful pie could get thrown together, but that's not every day, and we need to eat every day. The truth of the matter, most of us are living extremely scheduled lives, and you still need to make time for self-care, and part of that is what you eat.
Yeah. You are quite big on baking. So what for you would be the sort of the most versatile baking project that, anyone can make?
Yeah, there's a build your own cupcake recipe, which is kind of fun. It's build your own cookie cupcake. It could be a plain vanilla cupcake, or you could fold in like Oreos, speculoos, like any kind of crunchy cookie, like your favorite chocolate chip or shortbread. Have a wonderful frosting with it too. It also makes a layer cake, so you could make it into a special birthday cake if you wanted to with the same recipe. And I enjoyed it because, one, it's like a perfect vanilla cupcake. It's so like buttery and melt in your mouth and with a lovely flavor. But the cookie part's really fun. And a lot of us have like a special cookie we enjoy. It could be a lemon shortbread cookie. You could turn it into a lemon frosting to go with it. You could totally make it your own. It's very variable and it's like a fun, easy to do thing.
I love that. When you have one recipe that you can make many things out of it. Maybe it has something to do with, if you understand the pattern, then you can keep applying the pattern. Like if you know how to make a basic cupcake, then it doesn't take much to make 10 different cupcakes following that basic recipe with variations.
Once you understand, and honestly, if someone is struggling with baking, there's 2 suggestions I would give them. 1, get a scale. So much easier to have an accurate result. And people think they follow a recipe perfectly, and they might, except they scooped the flour out of a canister or bag, and you're adding like 60% more flour than the recipe called for, which makes it drier and breadier and less melt in your mouth. And the other one would be just to not overmix your batter. I always mix things until it's mostly combined, and then I turn the mixer off and use my spatula just to fold it together until the flour disappears. And that way it has a lovely crumb and consistency.
Right. So one of the biggest mistakes then when you have the wrong consistency is that you've mixed it too long.
That's true. Unless you use the reverse creaming method, which I have a couple of recipes in the book like that. And there you probably know, and many of your listeners do too. You take your fat and your dry mixture, and you beat them until it's a very tight, crumbly mixture, like wet sand, and you coat all the flour in fat. Then when you add the liquid in, you can mix it for a while longer and it won't activate the gluten and you'll still have a nice, beautiful crumb.
Right, yeah. The difference between cake and bread is the activation of the gluten.
It really is.
I find this all really interesting to, understand the process, the chemistry behind what is happening in your pot, because it is chemistry in the end. And once you understand those principles, that gives you then the freedom to experiment, right?
Totally. So that's where the person who went to culinary school and the intuitive baker have an intersection, because they mastered a recipe and like a basic technique. And from that, they can riff and do whatever they want. So as soon as you have like the basics down, you can totally change the flavor combinations. You could change so many things about the recipe and it'll still be delicious. You just need that mastery of the basics.
And going back to flavors you like personally, what are your 3 favorite spices?
I love cardamom. Like, you'll see a lot of it in my recipes. I have to hold it back because it can't be too much. I love using allspice too. It's like a lovely warming spice that I don't think gets enough play. And this isn't a spice, but as someone who's part Greek, I love lemon. So I love bringing that lightness either from the juice or the zest.
Yeah, I find just the squeeze of lemon can make such a massive difference to the flavor at the end.
I grew up in a house where instead of adding salt, you would add a little acid. So all of our soups were finished either in a splash of lemon juice or a splash of vinegar. And it gives you a brightness and contrast, which really wakes the flavors up.
Yeah, that is one of those basic principles of flavor, isn't it? The effect of acid. Obviously, the effect of salt is also a really important thing, but I think maybe the acid is a bit of a forgotten tool we have to brighten up flavors.
I totally agree.
Yeah, well, coming from Greece myself, I know all about adding lemon to everything.
Yes. Oregano also.
Yes.
And dill.
And dill. That is an interesting one, dill, isn't it? Because here where I now live in Britain, dill has very limited uses, like fish and maybe eggs. And in Greece, you would use dill everywhere.
That's one of my favorite herbs to use. I grew up having a spanakopita at many meals. Yeah, it kind of goes with everything. And my mom, if she ever made one, because it is a bit of a labor of love, she would make 2 and just pop one into the freezer so that she could kind of have it for a get together at short notice. And it saves a lot of time. It's an economy of scale. But she had tons of fresh dill in hers. I love those flavors.
So now that you live on a farm, are you growing your own herbs?
Yeah, I have a kitchen garden. It's in its most productive phase right now. And it's one of the joys in life just to be able to go and clip something and use it in a recipe or even take a nibble. We have a lot of fresh oregano, dill, mint, parsley, chives, and the list goes on.
And now, my kitchen friends, it's time for a quick break to see what I've been cooking up for you. If you ever feel trapped by recipes or wish you could get more creative in your kitchen, I made a free mini course. It's called Ditch the Recipes, and it's a short series of 5 emails that will help you get started on your intuitive cooking journey. Sign up on the website at theintuitivecook.co.uk/free or find the link in the show notes. And now, let's get back to our conversation. So yeah, as you say, the kitchen garden is at its most productive now. So how do you deal with gluts? I mean, obviously not everybody has a kitchen garden, but if you shop at markets or if you buy seasonal food, it will be best and cheapest when it's in season. So there may be an awful lot of courgettes, zucchini or tomatoes. So how do you deal with that without getting bored of it?
Well, one thing to do is a quick pickle, which is an easy way to preserve a lot of your vegetables. And you can also have those lovely glass mason jars, and they kind of brighten up your kitchen and give you a little taste of summer, even in the winter.
You mentioned you're doing the apricot chicken from your book today. So are you actually yourself cooking the recipes from your book frequently, or?
I have a lot of favorites in here, and like as a human being, I've loved the premise of quick and easy because I am super busy myself, and even a professional, I consider myself like a semi-professional, finds it daunting to get stuff done and avoid like the temptation of just like buying in food because you're tired. So these recipes have come together. There are also some really good family favorites. One of them is a little bit, it sounds maybe a bit ho-hum, but I love it, is my take on a Greek recipe that I grew up with, which is like a spicy tomato orzo. And it's like a silky sauce full of flavor, and it is brightened by lemon at the end with a little sprinkle of feta. My grandfather would make it for our Sunday dinners, and it could go with lamb, it could go with chicken, it's really goes with everything. And I wanted to just have like a streamlined version of it because the way my grandfather would make it, you'd be kind of at the stove, and these saucy pastas, you're always worried about them sticking and burning when you're cooking them. So this one finishes off in the oven, so it bakes perfectly. You have no minding it. And the base, my hack was to use a Bloody Mary mix, just because it's something that has like all this flavor in it, has a lovely like kind of semi-spicy profile, and saves me a lot of time personally making it. So it comes together really quickly, and the end result is like this. It's not soup, but it's so saucy and luscious and full of flavor, and it goes literally with anything you could put it next to. So I do make these things a lot. And the summer was really warm, so I made a lot of the salad, like the Mediterranean pasta salad, the summer rice salad, just nice cooling things that were delicious.
And what is your sort of go-to emergency meal when you can't be bothered to cook?
Sometimes it's a roast chicken, to be honest, because I could just pop it into the oven with some like potatoes and some cut up carrots, and it's almost a complete meal in itself. I would just serve it with a salad or some blanched vegetables or maybe some rice. That would be probably it. Or, this is a fish recipe that uses some dill. So I have a salmon steaks stuffed with cream cheese, Gouda, minced onion, a lot of dill, caraway seeds. It is so good. It's something I can make the filling a couple days in advance, and it hangs out in the fridge. And when I want to use it, it's like have the steaks, you cut a pocket, fill it, and pop it into the oven. And it bakes very quickly too. So that's another one.
Yeah, well, that doesn't sound like cheat meals at all. That are proper meals, and that is interesting to realize, isn't it? That a proper meal doesn't need that much work. If you have your flavorings ready and you just put it in the oven or the air fryer or whatever it might be, pop the fish in the oven, and it only takes 15 minutes.
Yeah, you can make it happen, and it can be so much more substantial than you imagine. It just comes down to some preparing. The preparation is the key. That's why it's called Preppy Kitchen. It's a play on words.
So do you actually plan all your meals yourself, or do you like improvising what you fancy on the day?
It's a little bit of both. I am a bit of an improviser, so I like to shop for a couple different options so I could make one of three things the next couple days. And then I'll just see what I feel like doing and how much preparation time that I have, because some things are a bit more involved or have a little bit more bake time, and you never know how the day is going to end up until the kids come home from school.
And how do you negotiate the sort of kids' food versus adult food in your family? Is that an issue, or do you just all eat the same thing?
We try to eat the same thing. The rule in the house is like you have to try something. You can't just say, no, I don't want this. Like even if you've had it before, like have a bite. Maybe you'll like it. I'm not going to force them to finish their plate, but I like to give the kids options too. So like I like to have my apricot chicken with rice. I'll offer it to them with pasta too as an option. So they could have a little bit of choice, but the main thing is the same.
And do you think that getting kids involved in cooking makes them more involved in eating as well?
It definitely does. They're so much more invested in the end product if they've had a hand in making it. One, because they're a bit curious, like, oh, look, I made this. What does it taste like? And it can make things like spices seem a little bit less intimidating because, oh, you added the spices in, so give it a try. Maybe you'll like it, you know?
How does one learn what goes with what? You know, how do you figure out what spice goes with something? How do you think we learn what goes with what? That is one of the big challenges people have.
It's really what you fancy as opposed to a rule. So it's trial and error, and you see what you enjoy. That's one of the reasons I liked having the variations in the book, because some people might be intrigued by a recipe, but they try it out. They're like, oh, I didn't like this flavor that was in there. But if you give substitutions for things that they could change, it's always going to be so much more helpful. Like, it could be something as simple as having a chocolate recipe with coffee in it. And you're like, oh, we're not a coffee household. Or like, I just don't want to do this with coffee. Or I have kids, I don't want them in caffeine. Then just let them know what you could add instead. Or it could be the same thing for using wine in a recipe or any number of things.
I find it always fascinating how, you know, you can be leafing through a recipe book and there is a recipe that just stops you in your tracks and you're thinking, oh yeah, wow, this is so delicious. I'm going to make this. And, you know, and the next person is going to be attracted to a completely different recipe. So what is it you think that attracts us to a certain recipe, or what attracts you to a certain recipe?
I'm so visual, I need to see it. So I never understood the old cookbooks, like from the 19th century, where they're just words. I'm like, oh, but what is this? I need to see what I'm making. And I'll be tantalized by the visual. So like, I made sure to have photos for all the recipes in the cookbook. And I think a lot of people are the same way. They need to see, like, what am I making? Does this look tasty to me? And then go from there.
Your books, and especially this last book, their photos look absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, it all looks just so delicious. These days, because photos are everywhere, as you said, you know, old cookbooks don't have photos. They can also be a bit intimidating because obviously photos in books, you know, there was a photo shoot and that's not how it looks in the kitchen normally. So how can we combine that being inspired by photos but not being intimidated by them?
It's interesting because as someone who does a lot of food photography, I'll look at a recipe sometimes and I'll think, this was cheated in a couple different ways. It could be something as simple as having fresh strawberries in a baked good. We all know that they turn a little sad and lose some of their color when they're baked. But if they're in a photo and they're ruby red, it's either been like edited or they popped actual unbaked strawberries in there, something like that. So for all of my recipes, I try to, you know, they look pretty and they're styled, but it is as it baked there's like minimal food magic happening. There's never anything like things getting popped out. And I think you just temper your expectations. Like if you've ever taken a picture of food at a restaurant, you know that it doesn't look as beautiful as it looks to your eyes. Food photography is an art. So you have to give yourself some grace.
Well, that's true of all photography, really. I mean, if I'm out there and there is a beautiful view, if I try to take a photo of it, it doesn't really make it any justice.
I think food is the worst, though. It's really difficult.
So, right. You've given us already quite a lot of tips and hacks, but if you were to, you know, pick 3 favorite hacks that make cooking super easy, what would that be?
I'm going to repeat myself a little bit. Get a scale, have a kitchen thermometer, because that can be so helpful, you know, for any kind of meat that you're making and for baked goods as well. And honestly, to stock your pantry, because having the ingredients at your fingertips will make any kind of food preparation so much easier and less stressful. For me, a lot of the stress comes from like something is missing and all of a sudden you have to stop. You're either ordering food or you're going into the market to get your missing ingredient. And it really messes up your day and disturbs the flow. So have your ingredients at hand.
And I guess if you're living out in a rural area now, getting to the shops is not that easy, is it?
No, it's not. So it's a whole thing. Even if you're in the city, it could be traffic.
Yeah, well, that's true. And has the fact that you now live on a farm and you're kind of closely involved with growing food. Has that changed the way you look at food or you cook yourself?
It's changed my understanding of what seasonal food is. And like we have a lovely few beds of strawberries. And in the summer, a summer strawberry is so different from what you would buy at the store. It's so delicate. You couldn't pop it into a container of strawberries. It would just all disintegrate to mush because it melts in your mouth. It's packed with flavor. And I have such an appreciation for seasonal ingredients now because they really are special. There's a reason they're only around once a year in nature. And there's something that you want to like kind of honor and highlight in your cooking.
And has your life sort of fallen in more into those seasonal rhythms now that you're so much closer to the seasonality of it?
It really has. Book one was all about kind of my transition from the city into the rural and falling into the seasons and understanding how being in a seasonal place like the East Coast, it doesn't just affect what ingredients are at hand seasonally. It affects how you want to eat. Because in the summer, you know, it's but a moment in time. So you're out and about, you're grilling, you're eating al fresco. I like lighter and brighter flavors. But in the winter, I want those warming spices. Things are bubbling away. I want to be around the stove. And I'm having more indulgent, cozy food.
Wonderful. So maybe one last question. What would you want people to take away from your book, Preppy Kitchen Super Easy? What would you hope for the book to help people discover in the kitchen?
That they could do it and have fun doing it as well. It's not some horrible task you have to do. It's something that can be really fun and provide a creative outlet as well. So you can have confidence in yourself, make something delicious, and have a good time doing it.
Lovely. Thank you so much, John, for this conversation. It's been
Thank you for having me. It's been so fun.
A real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much, and wishing you all the best with your book that has just come out a couple of weeks ago, right?
It's just out, and you can grab it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever books are sold.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, John.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of At Home with the Intuitive Cook. Check out the show notes for links and tasty morsels. And remember, fresh episodes are served up every other Friday. Subscribe to stay tuned and keep exploring the joys of everyday cooking. Until next time, stay curious, trust your taste, and don't forget, it's not rocket science, it's just dinner.